I'm Rick Byrne. I'm in the Geography Department at IUPUI. I want to tell you about an experience in Brazil. I was, and it's right here in this particular spot, and I was working on my PhD dissertation at the University of Florida, and I was lucky to receive a Fulbright for a graduate student to do some PhD research in Brazil. And so I went down there. I took my wife with me at that time, and we went about doing my work there in the state of Mato Grosso. And that's over in western Brazil. And here you see it again. And I was working along, and then around December or so, my wife became pregnant. And so this was okay. We'd been about 5 years without any kids, and so that was a welcome thing. And she was quite huge, and people kept saying, "Quantos?" which was Portuguese for how many? But the doctor said, one big boy. And so we went along with that for a while, and then we knew that would be September before she delivered, and so that we'd be back in the States by that time, and so that was sort of the plan. And then was one very strange thing happened back about on July 31st. She started going into labor, and so we had to go find a hospital in Grand Forks, not Grand Forks, in Campo Grande, and there we did, and we had a long labor. And about 5 in the morning on the 1st of August, we were at in the hospital there, and finally in the early morning, she came to deliver. They wouldn't let me in there. At that time, I was sitting outside, not knowing what was happening, and kind of nervous, and saw the nurse come out with a bundle in her hand and head over to the nursery and said, "Oh, is that my baby?" And I sort of said, "Well, I don't know." And I was thinking about going over there and checking, and then the nurse came out with another one and headed to the nursery. And what the heck's going on here? And it wasn't. And about a minute or two later, the doctor came through, and he held up his hand. He says, "Two little girls, duas meninas." And boy, couldn't believe this. And anyway, there were. We had a name for the girls. Actually, we had a name for a girl. Susan Elizabeth Byrne would have been her name, and but now there was two, and so we had to split the name, and so one became Susan Byrne, and the other Elizabeth Byrne. But then we decided, well, let's give them middle names, and so we honored the grandmothers and made one Susan Helen Byrne, the other Elizabeth Jean Byrne. And they were pretty small, premature. They weighed about, Susan weighed 3.3 pounds, and Elizabeth weighed 2.9 pounds. In their vulnerable state, they were kept in a hospital for a little while. Susan was released 2 days later, and Elizabeth stayed 10 days longer. The doctor thought Elizabeth would not survive. We were not allowed to see her because she was quarantined. We decided to give her final rites and brought the bishop. With a splash of holy water on her forehead, she suddenly gave out this vigorous cry and came alive, realizing that her loved ones were there for her. The nurses said they had never seen that before. And 10 days later, the doctor let us take her home. As it turned out, Susan and Elizabeth are mirror twins. Normally you have identical twins, but this is a different kind of twins. They're like, if you look in the mirror, you see yourself, and they were identical, and they see themselves, but one of them was left-handed and the other was right-handed. Because if you try that, you'll see that's the way it is. And so, as they went along in life, we began to see other things that tied into that. Susan was left-brained and Elizabeth was right-brained. And we just got to seeing that after a while. And then when they were about 1 year of age, 1.5, we had surgery. They needed surgery on their eyes. They were cross-eyed, and Susan had her left eye, had surgery on that, and Elizabeth had her right eye. And so this was another indication of the mirror twins. And then later on, we discovered that, and they started getting to the age where they were using their hands more and they were writing, and we discovered that Susan was left-handed writing, and Elizabeth was right-handed writing. And this was an interesting thing because Susan was very definite about her left-hand writing. When we lived we moved to Sudan for my first job, and I remember we were going to meals there and with the locals, and there you only eat with your right hand. And this was something that Susan wasn't about to do because she wasn't used to her left hand. But one of the fellows there reached behind his back with his left hand and grabbed her left hand, so she had no choice but to eat with her right hand. But she was pretty angry about that. But she went ahead and got to eat. But then I just recently discovered, this is just a month ago, that they are politically very opposite. One of them's a Republican and the other's a Democrat. And I'll let you guess which one is which. You are correct.